Let us proceed with the rights of the accused during trial. All these rights are provided in Section 14. Well, most of it are provided in Section 14 of Article 3. It says that no person shall be held to answer for a criminal offense without due process of law. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall be presumed innocent until the contrary is proved, and shall enjoy the right to be heard by himself and by counsel, to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation against him, to have a speedy, impartial, and public trial, to meet the witnesses face to face, and to have a compulsory process to secure the attendance of witnesses and the production of evidence in his behalf. However, after arraignment, the absence of the accused, uh, trial may proceed, notwithstanding the same, no? Provided that he has been duly notified and his failure to appear is unjustifiable, referring to trial in absentia. So these rights, together with these other rights, may be waived. Um, if it has to be waived, the waiver of the rights of the accused not only must be voluntary, but must be knowing, intelligent, and done with sufficient awareness of the relevant circumstances and likely consequences. Remember that remember that there are rights that the state is interested in, and there are rights that are personal to the person, the individual. Those which rights which the state has an interest in are those which cannot be waived. An example of that, which we have explained earlier in the previous lecture, is the right to be given his custodial investigation rights, not the CIR, no? Or the Miranda rights, if you want to call it still that, no? Although we don't call it the Miranda rights already, but custodial investigation rights. Other rights, the right to bail, the right to um, etong to be informed when he is not present, no? The right to present his own witnesses may be waived by the accused, no? In general, although all of those rights, again, except those rights in which the state has an interest in, and they cannot be waived. So the first up is due process. In criminal cases, due process involves a court or tribunal trying the case is being properly clothed with judicial power to hear and determine the matter before it. For the definition of what judicial power is, go to the definition in the article referring to the or the lecture referring to the judicial branch, no? Hearing of actual cases and controversies, no? Between two parties, no? May be applicable, of course, in criminal cases, no? The right to settle controversies. Jurisdiction is lawfully acquired over the person, and the accused is given an opportunity to be heard. The judgment is rendered only upon lawful hearing. If you think about it, the court must be properly constituted by law. It does not include courts which are outside the ambit of the law. For example, courts by insurgents are not covered by these rights. No? They are not constitutionally created, nor are they legally defined. No? Well, military courts will take that into consideration at a certain point in the lecture. No? Jurisdiction is acquired over the person of the accused. Well, you know how jurisdiction is acquired over the case and over the person in your remedial law. The opportunity to be heard, it may be waived when, for example, there is a failure to submit a responsive pleading. No? Judgment is rendered upon the lawful hearing, no? Thereafter. So this presumption, this due process first, the first requirement of due process, is not only for the accused, but it is a matter that is available for the state as well for all cases. The state, like the accused, is also entitled to due process according to People versus Santiago. The state is entitled to due process in criminal cases. In People versus Gomez, due process is not a monopoly of the defense, according to the case of People versus Webb. So, Is appeal a constitutional right? According to the case of the Marukot versus People, the right to appeal is not a natural right and it is not part of due process. It is merely a statutory privilege. As a statutory privilege, it must be guarded with much care. That's why the court may dismiss your appeal for technical reasons because it is not an inherent or natural right, but it is only a statutory grant. There is the right to be presumed innocent. The right to be presumed innocent comes from the idea that already the accused is at the other losing end. No? He is up against the entire structure and machinery of the state. Court is of the state, prosecution, even the public attorney is salaried by the state. No? You have the law enforcement that is salaried also by the state. The accused is at the losing end already, sans the presumption of innocence, because he is faced with the entire machinery of the state. The purpose is to balance the scale in what would otherwise be an uneven contest between the lone judicial or the lone individual pitted against the people and all the resources at their command. Indeed, when the circumstances surrounding the alleged commission of crimes are capable of two inferences, one favoring the accused or the innocence of the accused and the other his guilt, the inference for her innocence must prevail. Um, Therefore, because of the presumption of innocence, the prosecution must rely on its own evidence. No? He who asserts, not he who denies, must prove, because the accused is facing the allegations of the state. It is the state that alleges who must define. According to the Supreme Court, it is the prosecution's duty to prove each and every element of the crime charged in the or of information to warrant a finding of guilt for that crime as far as any other crime necessarily included therein, included. The prosecution must rely, therefore, on the strength of its own evidence rather than the weakness of the evidence of the accused. It's not about the weakness of the evidence of the accused because the accused is already presumed innocent. It is about the strength of the evidence of the prosecution because it is the prosecution that has the burden of proving that there is guilt beyond reasonable doubt. There is also the idea of the conflict between the presumption of innocence and the regularity in the presumption of evidence. In your remedial law, in your evidence, one of the presumptions is the presumption of innocence. The presumption of innocence has a greater value than not the presumption of innocence, but the presumption of regularity, which is in the rule of evidence that I'm referring to. The presumption of the regularity in the performance of duty. Between the presumption of regularity in the performance of duty, which is a mere rule by procedure, the presumption of innocence, which is constitutional, prevails because the presumption of regularity in the performance of duty could not prevail over the stronger presumption of innocence favoring the accused. Otherwise, the constitutional guarantee of the accused being presumed innocent would be held subordinate to a mere rule of evidence, allocating the burden of evidence. So that is in the case of People versus Mendoza. You have the accused having the right to be heard personally or by counsel. This includes the right to be present from arraignment to the promulgation of his sentence. And as far as counsel is concerned, it refers to the effective representation of counsel, not only the pro forma representation of a lawyer, but an active and effective representation. That's why the Supreme Court has a great primacy or primary value for the competence of the counsel who is to defend the accused. However, the choice of the counsel is not subordinated alone to the accused, no? Because it is not a plenary one. Because if counsel is absolutely dependent on the accused, then the tempo of the case will depend on the accused. Will choose an impossible a counsel that is impossible to engage, so that he can delay the proceedings, no? Because if there is a difficulty in attaining a counsel for the accused, one of the rights of the accused is that a counsel may be appointed by the court, calling the counsel as counsel de officio. The general rule is that, of course, as far as effective representation of counsel is concerned, the mistake of counsel binds the client, and it is only in instances wherein the negligence is so gross and palpable that courts may step in to grant relief of the aggrieved client. The concept of effective representation is anchored in many reasons. Now, one of them is that, again, the mistake of the counsel binds the client. The entire defense of the accused now depends on the counsel. So that if you have an incompetent counsel, the prosecution of the accused may be in peril. I mean, the defense of the accused may be in peril because of the lack of attention to detail of counsel. So, in the event that the accused has difficulty in engaging counsel, the Constitution also provides for a right to free legal assistance. So, assistance to the accused may be provided by a counsel de officio who may be appointed by the court. That's why lawyers, you future lawyers, when you take your oath, always remember that life, liberty, and property is at stake, and that this life, liberty, and property is not only that of those who can afford your services, because as lawyers, you are duty bound also to serve the people. You must be efficient and decisive in your legal assistance to your clients. No? You must be well versed in your case that is assigned to you or that you are engaged in, and you know your rules and the law before you go to court. You should come prepared, regardless if the client is paying or not. The right to a counsel the official does not cease upon the conviction of the accused by the trial court. It continues even during appeal. In this case of People versus Rio, it appears here that in this case that the accused was disheartened and wanted to withdraw his appeal because he can no longer afford counsel. The Supreme Court, with all the more reason, said that you should be represented by counsel with all due respect to counsel, because poverty should not be an excuse to deprive you of your rights. No? You must be represented, and you should be given more representation because you have less in life. Ube jus ibi remedium, where there is a right, there must be a remedy. The remedy is there, present in law, but if you are not efficiently or effectively represented, the remedy may be for nothing. No? So what gives you access to the remedy is the presence of a counsel. You must be given the right to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation against you. The purposes for this, the right to be informed, is to allow you, the accused, to know the description of the charge against you to permit you to make your defenses. So when you are informed, you are read the information during arraignment, you are in public, you are given the pre-notified of the allegations of the elements of the crime so that you can also prepare your defenses. And also to make you know if this is just a charge that has already been faced by you at another past time, to protect you from double jeopardy, because upon reading of the information, you could easily object to it by saying that this is a matter of a repeat accusation or prosecution for an already terminated case. That's double jeopardy. And so that you may be informed of the facts, the court may be informed of the facts alleged in the information. So these are the purposes of the right to be informed. So you are read the information in open court, you plead your guilty or not guilty plea, and thereafter, trial proceeds. No? Case of People versus Tabio tells you that the information read during arraignment, which covers your right to be informed, governs the the proceedings of the case. The only allegation or accusation that you are to face are those allegations or accusations which are read to you during arraignment through the information reading. Okay. The discrepancy of the date, in fact, for example, in People versus Aure says that insignificant details when misstated in the information does not affect the information. What is important is that there's a general statement in the information as to what you're accused against. So your presence as an accused is mandatory. The accused must be present during arraignment and must personally enter his plea. Both arraignment and plea shall be made of record, but failure to do so shall not affect the validity of the proceedings, meaning rather recording. No? So you must be present to be personally arraigned. However, note that in environmental cases, that if the accused fails to appear without justification on the date of the arraignment, the case can still proceed. It means that the accused has waived the reading of his information and authorizes the court to enter a plea of not guilty for him, no? And the court may thus set the matter for trial. So while the general rule is that arraignment requires your presence, otherwise the case cannot proceed. But in environmental cases, that's the exception because it may be the court that could enter the plea of not guilty for you. The right to a speedy, impartial, and public trial. First is speedy trial. This is a trial free from vexatious, capricious, and oppressive delays. It is to assure the innocent person to be freed from the anxiety of the expense of a court litigation. The longer the trial continues, the more expensive it is for the parties, especially the accused. No, justice delayed is justice denied. That's a cliche, but that is true. This is requirement of a speedy trial and even the speedy disposition of cases. This is designed to prevent the prolonged oppression of the accused by holding a criminal prosecution suspended over him for an indefinite time, meaning there is like akin to an imaginary sword always hanging on top of your head if cases are determined with delay, especially criminal cases. There may be um, delays in the proceedings against an accused, but there is no automatic dismissal of your case because of the violation of your right to speedy trial, because the court must consider the length of delay, the reason for the delay, the defendant's assertion of his right, and the prejudice to the defendant. A mere mathematical reckoning of time involved is clearly insufficient. The court, when it wants to determine whether your right to speedy trial has been violated, must look at all the circumstances attendant to your delay. Public trial is a requirement. It is for the benefit of the accused. The public may see that he is fairly dealt with. In a public trial, the court knows that public eye is on it. The counsels know that the client and their families are there, and the public is assured by the transparency of the proceedings generally in all cases, um, and that transparency allows for the court or motivates the court to even proceed more with care in the handling of cases before it. Is the right to witness the proceedings absolute? No, it also depends on the space provided or the circumstances attendant that would affect the logistical capabilities of the court, because not all courts are big enough to accommodate everyone. Also notice that during the pandemic, attendance in court, physical attendance in court, and the guests in court may be restricted because of the spread of the virus. No? How about publicity in trial? Note that the public trial is not primarily for the public to view the trial, but it is primarily for the accused. The accused has the right to a public trial, but it is a right that belongs to him more than anyone else. The public may view, but the right primarily belongs to the accused, where his life or liberty can be held critically in a balance. Notice that in this case of the request for the trial coverage of the cases against Estrada, court said that public trial is not synonymous with publicized trial. Public trial need not be publicized. Okay. An impartial trial, the court must proceed with all impartiality. What does this mean? That the court must act without prejudice. In other countries, in the jury system, in fact, the jury is even sequestered so that they remain unbiased, because there is a need for the court to be unswayed by any kind of pressure, and that the court must avoid any possibility of wrong influence. Even the theatrical stunts are not allowed. No? It must be free from improper influence and prejudicial or prejudices. No? So the judge must be of an unprejudiced mind, unbridled by the running emotions of or passions. That's why the judge must not only be impartial but must also appear to be impartial, because the public relies on his impartiality as well as his actual impartiality. Um, Read this case of Aquino versus Military Commission um, on the trial in military courts and the right to an impartial trial in military courts. In the present constitution, military tribunals cannot try and exercise jurisdiction over civilians for offenses committed by them. Okay. So compare the 73 Constitution and the 87 Constitution, where the 87 Constitution is clear that even the state of martial law does not suspend the operation of the Constitution or supplant the functioning of the civil courts and legislative assemblies. The right to confront witnesses, this is the right that to afford the accused an opportunity to test the testimony of witnesses and to allow the judge to observe the deportment of the witnesses. This is the point where the accused may cross-examine the witnesses for the prosecution. That is the right of confrontation. On paper, it may be through a responsive pleading, but for the court processes or proceedings, it could be the cross-examination. So, the Supreme Court has in its rules of court mandated some parameters or safeguards to allow for this right to cross-examine, that a person present in court before the judicial officer may be required to testify. And the court may issue a process to compel the attendance of witnesses. No? And that a failure by any person without adequate cause to obey a subpoena served upon him shall be deemed a contempt of court, from which may be a subpoena may be issued, and the consequences of contempt follows after. Trial and absentia. What is trial and absentia? Trial and absentia is the court proceeding with your case even in your absence. Well, there are consequences for the accused, but trial may proceed even in your absence. Section 1, Rule 115 says that these are among the rights of the accused to be present and defend in person by counsel at any stage of the proceedings from arraignment to the promulgation of judgment. And that the absence of the accused without justifiable cause at the trial of which he was notified shall be considered a waiver of his right to be present thereat. So for the court to allow trial in absentia of the accused must have already been arraigned. That's a requirement. Well, notice in environmental cases that despite the absence of the accused, again, the plea of not guilty may be entered by the court. And he has been duly notified of the trial, and his failure to appear is unjustifiable. So trial proceeds. No? So there are instances when the presence of the accused is also a duty and not only a right. First is arraignment and plea. The presence of the accused is a duty, no? During arraignment and plea. Also, when you are supposed to be present for identification purposes, your attendance in trial is a duty. And then during the promulgation of sentence, it's a duty, unless if it's for a light offense. If it's for a light offense, you may be represented by counsel or your representative. The right against self-incrimination is also among the rights of the accused. It says that no person shall be compelled to be a witness against himself, because no one is bound to accuse himself. The maxim is nemo tenetur sum accusare, because if the party were to be required to testify, he would simply commit perjury, because there is a temptation, to really have a person exonerate himself. So the compulsion may be through the use of violence, pressure, or moral coercion. These are all prohibited. No? You must distinguish this from the right to remain silent, this right against self-incrimination. The right to remain silent is for custodial investigation. you may be compelled by the court to speak up if your statement is not incriminating, So in a case, So this is to prohibit compulsory oral examination only, no? Um, so it's a testimonial compulsion, the main purpose of the provision for the purpose of extorting unwilling confessions or declarations implicating them in a commission of a crime. It is simply a prohibition to extract from the defendant's own lips against his will an admission of guilt. So it's verbal admission. It does not involve mechanical acts such as inspection of your bodily features. It's not verbal. It's not verbal. Or ocular inspection of your body is also permissible, because what is again prohibited is testimonial self-incrimination. It does not apply when the evidence sought to be excluded is not an incrimination but as part of object evidence. For example, fingerprinting, photographing, paraffin, or blood and DNA, these are all not testimonial compulsion, and they may be taken from the person. Measuring, photographing a party is not within the privilege of against self-incrimination. You may be measured or photographed and you cannot object because that is not testimonial. Writing is not testimonial. It involves the use of intellect. So you may object if what is required, for example, is a sample of your handwriting or your signature. Remember in RA 9165 Dangerous Drugs Law, a person who is arrested or apprehended may be subjected to a confirmatory test. Okay, in section 15. This is not incriminating because in a way this is not a court-compelled testimony. Second, it is mechanical. A drug test can be made upon persons who are apprehended or arrested, for drug cases. Social Justice Society versus Dangerous Drugs Board says that to impose a mandatory drug testing on the accused is blatant attempt to harness the medical test as a tool for criminal prosecution, contrary to the stated objectives of RA 9165. Drug testing in this case would violate a person's right to privacy and which are guaranteed. This does not, in this case, what was set forth by the court is the right to privacy and not the right against self-incrimination, because this is not mechanical. Sorry, this is not testimonial. This is mechanical drug testing. It must therefore be made clear that if a defendant in a criminal action is be asked a question which might incriminate him, not for the crime with which he is charged, but for some other crimes, he may also decline not to answer. That is covered by the right against self-incrimination. It's generally available in criminal proceedings, but it may also be applicable for administrative cases. Okay, in the case of Pascual versus Board of Medical Examiners. In the matter of incrimination, please refer to the distinctions between use immunity and transactional immunity. These are immunity statutes that would, though you may be asked to testify, may not subject you to criminal liability. Okay. Any evidence taken in violation of the foregoing shall, of course, be inadmissible. Okay. The right to the speedy disposition of cases is also among the rights of the accused. The court has a deadline on when to terminate cases by deciding on them. So all cases filed after the effectivity of the Constitution shall be decided within 24 months from the date of submission to the Supreme Court, and unless reduced by the Supreme Court, 12 months for the lower collegiate courts and 3 months for the other lower courts. Upon the expiration of the corresponding period, a certification to this effect signed by the Chief Justice of the presiding judge shall be issued, and a copy thereof attached to the records of the matter or of the case. It shall include a certification why the decision or resolution has not been rendered or issued within the said period. Okay. So Supreme Court, remember in section 18, part 2 of paragraph 2 of rule of Article 7, Supreme Court, itong martial law, di man gud ni siya dili siya criminal case, but this refers to a political law. Nasa deadline, is also the deadline of 30 days, no? Even for the civil service, hindi siya naman siya criminal case, but administrative cases also that are covered by this requirement of the speedy disposition of cases, deemed submitted for the decision um, upon the filing of the last pleading. No? Um, uh, there's also the deadline within 60 days. The expectation to expedite the result of cases once the case has ended is a matter of judicial conduct as well. It extends to all parties in all cases, civil, criminal, administrative, even judicial or quasi-judicial. No? The right is deemed violated only when the delay in the resolution of the case is attended by vexatious, capricious, or oppressive delays. And that does not include unjustified delays, no? Because justice delayed is justice denied, no? This case of CMPOD even says that the judge must be has an effective recording of the schedule of his cases, because she has to know what cases have been prolonged, when they were filed, so that he could give more priority to those cases which have been overstaying in the dockets. Failure to decide within the required period is inexcusable in this case of Raimundo versus Andoy, because it is a neglect of the duty of the judge, because he could always ask for an extension. Remember the distinction between the right to speedy trial and the right to speedy disposition of the cases before we leave this topic. Right to speedy trial refers to the speedy presentation of evidence of both parties and so on during the trial. Right to the speedy disposition of cases is now with the judge. That when everything has been said and done during trial, disposition refers to the speedy resolution of cases. So speedy disposition, is different from speedy trial. So that's it for that part on the rights of the accused.